to Live from Africa. I'm Ryan Green, and I'll be taking you through some of the history of these kingdoms in Central and South Africa. First up, as trade networks multiplied in the regions of sub-Saharan Africa, the volume of commerce was increasing, which encouraged state building in Central and South Africa. In Central Africa, these principal states were the kingdoms of Congo, Ndongo, Luba, and Lunda in the basin of the Congo River. The Kingdom of Congo emerged in the 14th century. Its rulers built a centralized state with officials overseeing military, judicial, and financial affairs. In 1492, a small Portuguese fleet came to the Congo River and started commercial relations with the Kingdom of Congo. Within only a couple years, Portuguese merchants established a close political and diplomatic relationships with the kings of the Congo. They provided the kings with advisors, military garrisons to support the kings, and protect the Portuguese interests. Relations with the Portuguese brought wealth and foreign recognition to Congo, but also led to the destruction of the kingdom and Angola, a Portuguese colony. The Portuguese tactics ended up undermining the authority of the kings, who appealed repeatedly but unsuccessfully for the Portuguese to seize or at least limit their trade in slaves. By the late 16th century, Congo was long torn by strife. Invaders raged the kingdom and allied with the Portuguese merchants. By 1665, relations with the Portuguese merchants and kings of Congo had deteriorated. The relationship got so bad that the two sides went to war. Soon after, Portuguese merchants withdrew from the Congo in search of more profitable business in the Kingdom of Ndongo to the south. Now moving on to the Kingdom of Ndongo, which was established in the 16th century. The Portuguese relations with Ndongo was overshadowed by its dealings with Congo. Some historians believe that because of this, Ndongo benefited from the lack of the Portuguese interests. Although officially ignored by the Lipson, the Angolan colony was a center of disputes usually concerning the slave trade between Portuguese traders and Mdumu people who inhabited Ndongo. The conquest of Angola did not come easy. For around 40 years, Queen Nzinga led spirited resistance against Portuguese forces. When she was in battle, she would wear male clothing while leading troops and insisted her subjects refer to her as king rather than queen to show dominance. She mobilized Central Africa people against her Portuguese adversaries, and she also allied with Dutch mariners, who traded frequently on the African coast during the mid-17th century. Her aim was to drive the Portuguese from her land, then expel the Dutch, and finally create a vast Central African empire, embracing the entire Congo basin. That's all from me. Now back to the studio.
Breaking news! The African invasion has begun, and we're bringing you the story right here on Channel 1600. Before we go on with the story, there's something you all need to know about the Islamic slave trade. African slavery was established during the Bantu migrations and has been a regular part of their society. That being said, the slaves that are a part of the trade are criminals, prisoners of war, and expelled members from clans. But recently, with the growing demand for slaves, innocent citizens are being kidnapped and forced into bondage. European merchants have been conducting lightning raids. African administrators are allowing and sometimes even providing horses to these merchants that are raiding their villages and stealing innocent people who weren't meant to be part of the trade. Those people are then either shipped across the Sahara Desert or sent to Swahili port cities to be sent to plantations all across the world. If they aren't sent to Europe, they're sent across the Indian Ocean by ships. European and Muslim merchants see Africa as this place where they are able to find employees to run their plantations. In exchange, the African people are given European products, most notably firearms. They want slaves to distribute to the Mediterranean basin, Asia, India, and China. About 10 million Africans have been evicted from their homes so far and have been forced into servitude all over the world. In other news, Portuguese merchants also want slaves. However, they realized that it was easier to purchase their slaves instead of capturing them in the Ocean by ships. European and Muslim merchants see Africa as this place where they are able to find employees to run their plantations. In exchange, the African people are given European products, most notably firearms. They want slaves to distribute to the Mediterranean basin, Asia, India, and China. About 10 million Africans have been evicted from their homes so far and have been forced into servitude all over the world. In other news, Portuguese merchants also want slaves. However, they realized that it was easier to purchase their slaves instead of capturing them after a failed capture attempt. They realized this after being deterred by thousands of poison-tipped arrows fired from African warriors. Due to small population quantities, the Portuguese have purchased a large number of slaves, sent them to Atlantic sugar plantations in Sao Tome, and the working conditions have been horrible. This has also been extended to South America. European ships are undertaking voyages of 3 legs: sugar, slaves, horses, and European goods. We decided to take a closer look at the conditions the slaves underwent during the trade, and what was uncovered was disturbing. Upon capture, slaves are forced to march to the coast, where they lived in holding pens until a ship arrived to transport them to the Western Hemisphere. After that, they are sent on the Middle Passage, the transatlantic expedition where passengers are placed on board filthy, overcrowded ships. They're placed below decks in disgustingly close quarters. Barely enough room to sit upright, but barely enough room to stand. Some are forced to lie in chains on shelves with almost half a meter, about 20 inches away, between each one. The slaves that attempt to starve themselves have their mouths pried open with tools or are thrown into the ocean instead of apparently wasting the traders' food and supplies. I've recently been told that traders are working to improve the conditions for the slaves. However, that will never change the damage that has been done.
As previously mentioned, the Middle Passage is bringing African slaves to tropical and subtropical regions in the Western Hemisphere. Reporting on the ground in locations such as the Spanish colony of Hispaniola, established in 1516, show large amounts of cash crops such as tobacco and sugar being produced. Other reporting shows cotton and coffee on the way to begin large-scale production in the 18th century. Channel 1600's own reporters who have been following the duration of the slave trade report sharp racial differences on the plantations. There are a small amount of European supervisors with a large amount of slaves. In the Caribbean and South America, there is also reported rising disease such as malaria and yellow fever, causing the number of slaves to become fewer. Reporters in North America show better treatment of slaves, where they are encouraged to form families and have children. In other news, slave resistances seem to occur no matter the region. Mild forms of resistance have been seen in slaves purposefully working slowly and sabotaging work equipment. Reports also show more serious forms of resistance such as running away, which has been seen to be punishable by death. Most recently, runaway slaves have been forming groups known as Maroons, where they build their own self-governing communities. The most serious form of resistance has been seen in the slave revolt, something that I predict will only lead to the overthrow of the French sugar colonies in 1793. Most importantly, there has been an obvious rise in the African American heritage formed through the Middle Passage. In the South, slaves dominantly speak a Creole language called Geechee that was shaped by European influence. As far as religion goes, a syncretic form of Christianity has been seen by the slaves who converted. Conversion took place either back in Africa or on the way to North America through the Middle Passage. Reports show traditional Christian symbols along with drumming and dancing, which are traditionally found in Africa. Our own food reporter has also told Channel 1600 about a new food called gumbo, made with African okra, European sauteed vegetables, and American shellfish. This is all put together with the new rice cultivation in the South. Our arts reporter has also seen syncretic art forms as well. Fast forwarding a few hundred years, we have breaking news on the American and French revolutions that contradict slavery. A large-scale revolt was recently seen by Olaudah Equiano His recently published book has also added to anti-slavery efforts. Olaudah has been speaking throughout the British Empire and Parliament for anti-slavery efforts. In other news, the price for maintaining slaves and armies to quell rebellions has led to a struggle in cash crop prices against the lower prices found in the Caribbean. Reports also show that the further industrial revolution will also take away from the profitability of slavery. All over the world, Denmark is slated to abolish slavery in 1803, along with a stream of other European nations in the following years. Reporters on the seas show Great Britain attempting to prevent the slave trade through search and seizure operations. That's all we have today on Channel 600 News. Thanks for watching.